Dr. Bamo, welcome to the room. I'm glad to see you here. Dr. Bamo is the author of Elite Theory on the US intervention in Iraq, and I think he has some thoughts to share with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Just a few kind of thoughts to share on the matter. I think one of the interesting things with this particular moment, and of course related to Sheena being Kurdish but also being Iranian at the same time, is that the protest movement has a multitude of different identities. It's this kind of situation is almost like the tip of the iceberg. Iran's repressive regime has been operating for a long time. There's been mass discontent for a very long time, but very, very well controlled, regulated, repressed, however you want to relate to it. And also, what's been very, very interesting is that this comes at a time when, if you like, Tehran's kind of pledged an allegiance, if you like, of support to Russia without Western media kind of highlighting that or making a big fuss of that. When this moment has come to kind of highlight this particular incident, the Western media's kind of gone all out with it, and we're seeing it everywhere. But what's interesting and kind of where developments will go, just to kind of put some thoughts out there, it'd be unrealistic to think, oh, this is going to lead to regime change, because you're looking at one of the most resilient regimes in the Middle East, been able to overcome sanctions and loads of different economic challenges. And also, Iran has a span all over the Middle East, even as far as parts of Asia, like Afghanistan, even Pakistan. So there's almost like an asymmetrical defense mechanism that it has. It has loads of allies either way. I think this, at best, you might see some sort of compromise over the hijab and the mandatory nature of wearing it. But I think it'd be interesting to kind of see how all the different identities within Iraq also emerge. And I think this is also a big moment for the different identities within Iran, sorry, because Iran isn't just a single identity place. It's very, very similar to other parts of the Middle East. But in this protest, we've seen these different identities emerge, and also seen the kind of unity in these protests as well. So I just thought to add that in, and it's been very, very kind of insightful, if you like, to hear everybody's thoughts so far. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to welcome Huda back. Unfortunately, she had to step out for about 20 minutes, but I'm glad you're back, Huda, and I'd like to pick your brains a bit more. We discussed a few things that stands out. One of them is some people believe that perhaps Iranians feel uncomfortable with seeing Kurdish flags at demonstrations. What are your thoughts on that? I know I'm sort of putting you on the spot at the moment, but I wonder whether you think these demonstrations have brought Iranians and Kurds in Iran closer, or do you think that sort of differences still remain?
No worries.
I
I
just put you
appreciate
on the
the
spot.
question. No,
I was like, she's
no,
back.
no,
Let me
no.
just grab her.
Happy to be back. Great first question back. I tend to be an optimist, but I mean, obviously, I also want to be real, like very realistic and nuanced. So I think that there are the Iranian community is not unified, right? Like, I think that there are so many different groups of Iranians around the world. Many of them, to be quite honest, are anti Kurdish, and many of them are anti Black. Many of them are anti Islam. Many of them are anti Semitic. And I think it's hard truly to say one people could, I think is a certain way or isn't. I think if we look at the state, obviously, we see, a lot of structural state violence against Kurdish communities in Iran. I think that's very apparent. I do tend to be an optimist. I do think that there's also a difference between the Iranian diaspora and the Iranians on the ground. From the people who I've been in touch with on the ground in Iran, a lot of whom are leading these protests, a lot of whom are, journalists, for example, who are banned from working, community organizers who are banned from working, nonprofit organizers who are banned from working. Listening to them and just having conversations night after night, there's a central recognition, at least in the circles that I'm a part of, that Mahsa Amini, Jiyan Amini is Kurdish. And this is sparked from this sort of a unification of ethnic background in Iran and the demand for, women, life, freedom, which originally, as we've all mentioned, is originally a Kurdish slogan, is now unifying Iranians in Iran and to some extent outside of Iran. I think at the bare minimum, I do think that this is raising the sort of recognition that Kurdish issues are systemically sort of there's systemic violence against Kurdish people in Iran, and that this brings to light sort of the Kurdish space within the role of leading these movements. I think that there's a long way to go before
Yeah.
the Iranian community at large, homogeneously, I think is on the same page. Whether it's to kind of come together and see Kurdish people on the same page, or like Black Iranians and other ethnic minorities as well too.
And I wonder, at the end of these, if there's an end to these demonstrations, what is the most likely scenario that we're going to see? And, I asked this earlier while you were out, and what if, suppose the government says, fine, mandatory headscarves are no longer required, it is a option. Do you think then the protests will die out, or because one of the groups that are perhaps most disadvantaged in Iran are Kurds, who as you have Kurdish political prisoners on death row. You have teachers who are currently languishing in jail because they dare to teach the Kurdish language. So I wonder, within this context, do you think the vast majority of Iranian women in particular who demonstrated, is it just a question of the headscarf, or do they have other grievances?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that we did, as these slogans sort of like really bring to the forefront, is that this isn't just about hijab. And I hope that this is that if the government comes to a point where it decides that hijab is no longer mandatory, that if not the protests themselves, the energy and the spaces that they have opened up for conversation to push beyond and imagine something better, maintain and continue to sort of be nourished in the years to come and days to come. I would never have the audacity to know where something like this is headed. I would never claim to be like, this will be or will not be, So I never try to make those speculations, but sort of just like watch and try to understand as they unfold. But I do think, though, that at the end of the day, like as Ruth Wilson Gilmore, a very incredible Black writer, writes, is that revolution is a rehearsal. And so I think these moments, even if they themselves won't reach to the ultimate conclusion of liberty and freedom for everybody, there's still a rehearsal. There's something liberatory about the action of being able for Kurdish women and non-Kurdish women standing side by side, demanding the same thing, saying the same chant. And I think that's something that's very beautiful and that can't be taken away at the end of the day, is that the moments and spaces that movements like this create the opportunities for are beautiful, and I think create so much deeper spaces for exploring, having conversations, and deepening these demands, and also at the same breath being able to actually tangibly practice these demands, beyond just like women not wearing the hijab in the streets, but being able to fight together, express solidarity with each other. We've seen so many videos of people who are being chased by the Iranian police and are being let into people's personal homes, which then we'll see like ammunition or different types of bullets being used in order to repress them. But I think there is so much beauty in these moments, and even if they don't get to the ultimate goal that the demands are demanding, I don't think that necessarily means that they're unsuccessful.
And I think the slogan Jiyan, Azadi is actually a Kurdish one that's been by protesters. And personally, I've never seen wide-scale demonstrations where a Kurdish slogan was used and accepted. So that was a very interesting change. Awa, I know you had your hand up. Please do join in as we wrap up in the next 5 minutes. I want to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. I just would like to add a more optimistic view on if the Iranian diaspora, for example, is more unified with the Kurds here. And this is only my impression, like if I might be wrong, but from my point of view, I think that there is a minimal consensus on the basic rights that these people are protesting, like human rights, women rights, and minority rights. And if this is the base, we might have a better outcome. And I want to believe that this regime is being toppled this time. Okay, I think that if we have this as a base, it is absolutely possible that the Kurds and the Iranian people are absolutely capable of finding a way to live better together, to respect each other's rights, to give his to give his sorry to give each other more space and more discourse and more peace. And that's why I think like this time it differs really because they are unified. And it might be very optimistic, but I think Iran will find its own way of democracy after this. So I want to be very optimistic in this case. Thank
I
you.
think we all do. I think we all. I admire your optimism. I think what we're likely to see in the next few weeks is definitely more uncertainty. But
Just I wanted to say something. Dr.
sure.
Bahmo said something. Sorry, about Iran power in the region. I think Iran problem is inside, is not outside. Yes, I agree. If there was a foreign powers trying to attack Iran, Iran could mobilize all those forces, militias, use, I know in the media in the West, they call about adventurism, all the Shia Christian, all the way to Lebanon. Yes, I think Hezbollah and all the Shia groups could cause American or any country who attack Iran. But I think the problem at this point of time, one of the problem is Iran investing so much of those capitals supposed to be invested in its own people, in those militia groups. I don't believe it's going to help the government of Iran. Don't forget, when the Arab Spring happened, Iran until then, it was helping Hamas for so many years. Immediately, Khalid Mash'al moved from Syria to Egypt, distance himself from Iran and get closer even to Erdogan in Turkey. I don't believe even Hezbollah or all those Shia political parties or Shia militia groups in Iraq, they would remain loyal to Iran when those dollars stop coming from Tehran. That's why I strongly believe Iran, despite its influence in the region, it has nothing to do with its own problem at home. South Africa, during the apartheid, they had a nuclear bomb, but what they could do with the nuclear bomb, drop it over their own people in South Africa? They were forced to come sit down with Mandela and negotiate. Of course, they were smarter. In the peak of power, they negotiate and they secure their own future and their children. But the reality is, in Iran too, even if they have a nuclear power, they can't do anything because the problem is within, is not outside.